The crisp scent of lilies, usually a comfort, felt suffocating today. Su Qi stood in the opulent living room of the Su family home, a place that had promised warmth but delivered only a chilling emptiness. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny, mocking reflection of her own insignificance. Her fingers, roughened from years of menial chores, twisted nervously in the folds of her simple dress. They think they can just discard me, she thought, her stomach clenching. Like a broken toy they've grown tired of. You can't even wash clothes properly, Mrs. Su's voice, sharp as shattered glass, pierced the tense silence. Her perfectly coiffed hair and elegant attire seemed to mock Su Qi's plainness. Look at this stain. You think you're still the Su family's precious little princess? Su Qi flinched, not from the words themselves, but from the sting of familiarity. Years of such criticisms had left their mark, a constant, dull ache in her chest. She looked down at the offending garment, a simple white blouse, the stain barely visible. A setup, she thought, the realization cold and hard. Another one of Mingzhu's little games. Mr. Su, his face etched with disappointment, sighed heavily. We've tried, cheer. We really have. But your clumsiness, your lack of refinement, it's just too much. He avoided her gaze, his words laced with a weariness that cut deeper than any open accusation. Su Qi's throat constricted. Lack of refinement. How many times had she heard that phrase? It was a veiled insult, a constant reminder of her perceived inferiority to Mingzhu, their perfect, graceful daughter. They never saw me, she thought, a bitter taste rising in her mouth. They only saw what they wanted to see. It wasn't me, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't push Grandma. It was Mingzhu. The accusation hung in the air, thick and heavy. A ripple of shock went through the room. Mrs. Su gasped, her hand flying to her chest. How dare you, she shrieked, her face contorting with rage. How dare you accuse your sister of such a thing? Mr. Su's face hardened. We don't need your lies, Su Qi, he said, his voice cold and final. Your family is here to pick you up. The word struck Su Qi like a physical blow. Pick me up. To send me away. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She gripped the back of a nearby chair, her knuckles turning white. She looked around the room, at the faces of her family. Her adoptive father, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of relief and guilt. Her adoptive mother, her face a mask of righteous indignation. Jingshen, Mingzhu's brother, stood silently by the window, his expression unreadable. Even Grandpa Su, usually so kind, looked at her with a detached sadness. They're all against me, she realized, the thought a chilling whisper in her mind. They've already made up their minds. Han Zhichen, Mingzhu's fiancé, stood near the doorway, observing the scene with an unsettling calmness. His eyes, usually warm and friendly, were now cold and distant. He had once been her fiancé, a promise snatched away and given to Mingzhu. Now, he stood there, a silent witness to her downfall. Su Qi felt a pang of something akin to betrayal, a sharp, stinging pain in her heart. He knows, she thought, her gaze locking with his. He knows the truth. Even Bai Yi, the Bai family's son, often dismissed as intellectually disabled, watched her with an intensity that belied his usual vacant expression. There was a flicker of understanding in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the injustice unfolding before him. His presence, usually a source of discomfort for the Su family, was now a strange comfort to Su Qi. He sees me, she thought, a small spark of hope igniting within her. He sees through their lies. The servants, silent observers hovering in the background, exchanged furtive glances. They had witnessed the years of subtle manipulations, the whispered lies, the carefully orchestrated incidents that had slowly eroded Su Qi's standing in the family. Their silence was a testament to the power dynamics within the household, a fear of speaking out against the favored daughter. Su Qi drew a shaky breath. She knew she couldn't fight them. Not anymore. They had already condemned her, judged her guilty without a trial. The years of isolation, of being treated as an outsider in her own home, had taken their toll. She felt a strange sense of detachment, as if watching the scene unfold from a distance. "Fine," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'll go." She turned and walked towards the stairs, her back ramrod straight. Each step was a deliberate act of defiance, a refusal to let them see her break. As she ascended the stairs, she could feel their gazes on her back, heavy with judgment and disdain. Let them watch, she thought, a flicker of anger igniting within her. Let them see me walk away. But I'll be back. The image of Mingzhu's triumphant smirk flashed in her mind, fueling her resolve. This isn't over, she vowed silently. This is just the beginning. The wrought iron gates of the Su family home stood sentinel, their ornate curls a stark contrast to the ugliness unfolding within. Sunlight, sharp and unforgiving, glinted off the polished metal, reflecting the distorted faces of the gathering crowd. Su Qi stood amidst the swirling chaos, a lone figure in a simple, worn dress, the fabric clinging uncomfortably in the humid air. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a caged bird desperate for escape. They're going to do it again, she thought, a chilling premonition settling in her gut like a stone. They're going to hurt me again. Accusations, sharp and venomous, flew around her like poison darts. "You wicked woman," shrieked Aunt May, her face contorted in a mask of fury. "You dared to lay your hands on Grandma. After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us." Su Qi flinched, not from the volume, but from the chilling familiarity of the scene. How many times had she stood here, the target of their manufactured rage, a scapegoat for their internal conflicts? It's always me, she thought bitterly. Always the villain in their twisted narrative. Her gaze swept over the faces surrounding her, servants whispering behind cupped hands, relatives casting judgmental stares, and her own adoptive parents, their expressions a mixture of disappointment and thinly veiled contempt. Even Jingshan, her adoptive brother, stood silent, his eyes averted, a passive participant in her ongoing torment. A dull ache throbbed behind her eyes, a familiar companion to the ever-present knot in her stomach. She wanted to scream, to rage against the injustice, but the words caught in her throat, choked by the years of suppressed emotions. Her father, Su Goen, stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "Get out," he commanded, his finger pointing towards the gates. "Get out before he trailed off, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. Su Qi's breath hitched. The raw, undisguised hatred in his eyes sent a shiver down her spine. He doesn't even see me, she realized, a wave of despair washing over her. He sees only the monster they've created. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, its polished surface mirroring the scene with unsettling clarity. The back door opened, and Su Mingzhu emerged, her elegant figure a stark contrast to Su Qi's disheveled appearance. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on Mingzhu's lips as she surveyed the situation. Su Qi's stomach churned. She orchestrated this, she thought, a cold certainty gripping her. She's enjoying this. Mingzhu's arrival seemed to galvanize the crowd. The whispers intensified, feeding on the drama of the moment. Su Qi felt a suffocating pressure closing in, a sense of impending doom settling over her like a shroud. Her mother, a woman whose initial warmth had long since been replaced by icy indifference, added her voice to the chorus of condemnation. "Take her away," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Teach her a lesson." The words, though softly spoken, held a chilling weight. Su Qi knew what they meant. It wasn't just about being sent away, it was about the unspoken punishment that awaited her, the calculated cruelty that had become a regular feature of her life. The last shreds of hope withered within her. "They're not going to listen," she thought, a crushing sense of defeat overwhelming her. "They never listen." Two burly men stepped forward, their faces impassive, their movements practiced. They grabbed her arms, their grip tight and unforgiving. Su Qi struggled, her body fueled by a surge of adrenaline, but it was no use. They were too strong. "Let me go," she cried, her voice raw with desperation. "This isn't fair. You're wrong about me." Her words were swallowed by the rising clamor of the crowd. No one seemed to hear, or perhaps they simply didn't care. She looked at Mingzhu, her adoptive sister, her tormentor. Mingzhu met her gaze, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of triumph and malice. In that moment, Su Qi saw the truth reflected in those cold, calculating eyes. It wasn't just about jealousy, it was about something deeper, something darker. Mingzhu wanted her gone, erased, eliminated. And she would stop at nothing to achieve her goal. As they dragged her towards the waiting car, Su Qi's gaze swept over the faces of her family one last time. She saw indifference, hostility, and a chilling lack of remorse. This is it, she thought, a strange sense of calm settling over her amidst the turmoil. This is the end of my life as I know it. The car door slammed shut, severing her last connection to the Su family, to the life she had once believed was hers. As the car sped away, leaving the ornate gates and the hostile crowd behind, Su Qi closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but a tear of resolve. This is not the end, she vowed silently. This is the beginning. The opulent chandelier cast a deceptive glow over the Su family's grand living room, its crystal facets shimmering like frozen tears. The air, thick with the cloying scent of lilies, felt suffocating to Su Qi. She sat perched on the edge of a plush armchair, a stark contrast to the room's extravagant decor. Her fingers traced the intricate patterns of the silk cushion, a nervous habit she developed over the years, a silent testament to the unease that permeated her existence within these walls. She'd changed her clothes, the torn fabric replaced with a simple, high-necked blouse that concealed the angry welts blooming across her collarbone. The pain throbbed beneath the fabric, a constant reminder of the afternoon's events. Each inhale, a shallow, stuttering gasp, echoed the fractured state of her heart. The click of the front door latch jolted her from her reverie. Mingzhu's laughter, bright and melodic, drifted in, followed by the deeper timbre of Han Jiachen's voice. Su Qi's stomach clenched. She could practically hear the unspoken words hanging in the air, the accusations already forming in their minds. Clumsy. Troublemaker. Liar. The labels that had been branded onto her soul. Mingzhu, Jiachen, you're back, Mother Su's voice chimed from the dining room, laced with the honeyed sweetness she reserved for her favored daughter. The contrast stung, a familiar barb in Su Qi's side. Mingzhu swept into the living room, a vision of elegance in a flowing emerald gown. Her eyes, bright with feigned innocence, landed on Su Qi. A flicker of something, was it triumph? Crossed her face before being replaced with a carefully crafted mask of concern. Xiao Qi. What happened to you? Su Qi flinched. The question, dripping with false solicitude, felt like a physical blow. Why pretend? You know exactly what happened. She kept her gaze fixed on her hands, the knuckles white against the pale silk. I fell, she mumbled, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. Jie Chen, standing slightly behind Mingzhu, observed the scene with a detached air. His eyes, usually warm and engaging, held a guarded coolness. Su Qi caught his fleeting glance, a silent acknowledgement of her plight, yet his lips remained sealed. He knows, she thought, a bitter taste rising in her throat. He knows, and he chooses to remain silent. Fell. Mother Su's voice sharpened, laced with disbelief. She entered the living room, followed by Father Su and Jingshan. How could you be so careless? We have important guests coming for Grandpa's birthday banquet tomorrow. What will they think? The banquet. Another opportunity for Mingzhu to shine, to bask in the adoration of the Su family's influential circle. Su Qi, as always, would be relegated to the shadows, a silent observer of her adoptive sister's triumphs. As if my existence is a stain on their perfect family portrait. Mother, it was an accident, Mingzhu interjected smoothly, her voice laced with gentle reproach. Xiao Qi didn't mean it. Su Qi's jaw tightened. Mingzhu's performance was flawless, the perfect embodiment of the caring, protective older sister. The irony was a suffocating weight in her chest. She's our Su family's precious daughter, Father Su declared, his voice booming with paternal pride. He directed a stern look at Su Qi. Who would dare bully her? The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air. Who would dare bully her, except for the very people claiming to protect her? Su Qi's hands trembled. The urge to scream, to rip away the facade of this picture-perfect family, was almost overwhelming. But years of suppressed emotions had taught her the futility of resistance. Jingshan, leaning against the doorway, watched the exchange with an unreadable expression. He caught Su Qi's eye for a fraction of a second, a flicker of understanding in his gaze. He knew. He had always known. Yet, like Jie Chen, he remained silent, a prisoner of the family's intricate web of lies. The conversation shifted to the details of the banquet, the guest list, the menu, the seating arrangements. Su Qi's presence became increasingly peripheral, her existence reduced to a silent shadow in the corner of the room. The throbbing pain in her shoulder intensified, mirroring the ache in her heart. She closed her eyes, retreating into the sanctuary of her own thoughts, a desolate landscape of hurt and betrayal. Later, as the family dispersed, Grandpa Su approached her. His hand, gnarled and age-spotted, rested gently on her arm. Xiao Qi, he murmured, his voice raspy with age, I know. His words, simple yet profound, pierced through the layers of deception that had suffocated her for so long. His eyes, clouded with age yet sharp with wisdom, held a glimmer of understanding, a silent promise of justice. In that moment, amidst the opulent grandeur of the Su family home, Su Qi felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a fragile ember in the darkness. The opulent chandelier cast a cold, unforgiving light on the polished marble floor of the Su family's living room. It was late, the shadows stretching long and distorted, mirroring the twisted relationships within the room. Su Qi stood before them, a solitary figure amidst the accusatory glares. Her hands, clenched at her sides, trembled slightly, but her gaze remained unwavering, locked on Su Mingzhu's triumphant smirk. The silence hung heavy, thick with unspoken resentments and years of carefully constructed lies. It was a silence Su Qi intended to shatter. So, Su Goen began, his voice laced with paternal disappointment that always seemed reserved for her, never Mingzhu. Care to explain the incident? He gestured vaguely, his words a veiled accusation. Explain. Su Qi thought, a bitter laugh rising in her throat. Explain how she'd been pushed, how she'd been framed, how she'd spent years being the scapegoat for Mingzhu's carefully orchestrated misdeeds. Explain how for years you've all been blind, she wanted to scream. Instead, she swallowed the words, the familiar lump of despair forming in her chest. Mingzhu, ever the picture of fragile innocence, dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Father, I don't want to make things difficult for Qi Mei, but, she trailed off, her voice a delicate whisper. But you will, Su Qi thought, recognizing the well-practiced performance. Mingzhu's act was flawless, a masterpiece of manipulation honed over years. Difficult? Su Qi's voice, though low, cut through the room like a shard of glass. You think this is difficult? Try spending 3 years in a reformatory for something you didn't do. The words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. The Su family's carefully curated image of perfection began to crack, the fissures spreading with each syllable. Su Goen's face hardened. Don't be dramatic, Qi. We sent you there for your own good. His words were a dismissal, a refusal to acknowledge the truth. Su Qi's heart twisted in her chest. My own good? She closed her eyes briefly, the memories of the reformatory flooding back, the cold, damp walls, the stale air thick with the stench of despair, the echoing screams that still haunted her sleep. My own good? Su Qi repeated, her voice rising, laced with a bitter edge. They whipped me with belts, they fed me toilet water, each word was a blow, aimed at the wall of denial the Su family had built around themselves. And where were you? She asked, her gaze burning into her adoptive father's face. You were celebrating Mingzhu's birthday. The room went silent. Even Mingzhu's practiced facade faltered for a moment, a flicker of unease crossing her features. Su Jingshan, who had remained silent until now, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew, Su Qi realized. He had always known. Su's mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's not true, she stammered, but the conviction in her voice was gone, replaced by a wavering uncertainty. The seed of doubt had been planted. Su family rule, disrespect to elders, 10 strokes, Grandpa Su's voice boomed, breaking the tense silence. He looked at Su Qi, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and something else. Regret? Pity? Su Qi couldn't decipher it. And what about Mingzhu's disrespect? Su Qi challenged, her voice trembling but resolute. What about her lies? Her manipulations? Enough. Su Goen roared, slamming his hand on the table. The crystal vase in the center rattled precariously. You will not speak to your sister that way. Sister. Su Qi laughed, a hollow, broken sound. She's never been my sister. She's the reason I lost everything. She looked at Mingzhu, her gaze unwavering. You stole my life, Mingzhu. You stole my family, my fiancé, she paused, her voice thick with emotion. Everything. Han Zhechen, who had remained a silent observer until now, finally spoke. Mingzhu, he said, his voice calm but firm, tell the truth. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and for the first time, Su Qi saw a flicker of something other than indifference in his eyes. Support. Understanding. Hope blossomed tentatively in her chest. Mingzhu's carefully constructed composure finally shattered. It's not true, she shrieked, her voice shrill, her eyes wild. She's lying. She's always been jealous of me. But her denial fell flat, ringing hollow in the charged atmosphere. The cracks in the Su family's facade had widened into gaping chasms, revealing the rot beneath the surface. The truth, like a festering wound, had finally been exposed. And Su Qi, standing amidst the wreckage of their lies, felt a strange sense of liberation. The pain was still there, raw and searing, but it was accompanied by a newfound strength, a resolve to reclaim what had been stolen from her. The night was far from over. The storm had just begun. The crystal chandeliers cast a shimmering, almost suffocating, glow across the opulent banquet hall. The air, thick with the aroma of lilies and roasted duck, buzzed with forced gaiety. Su Qi stood slightly apart from the throng of elegantly dressed guests, the silken fabric of her dress a cold contrast to the burning resentment that coiled in her stomach. Laughter, brittle and artificial, echoed around her, each peal a tiny hammer blow against the fragile wall of her composure. They're all enjoying the show, she thought, the bitter taste of irony coating her tongue. The show of my humiliation. Mingzhu, radiant in a dazzling white gown, held court near the head table, her laughter ringing out like a silver bell. Su Qi watched her, the familiar pang of envy twisting into something sharper, more corrosive. It wasn't just envy anymore. It was loathing. How can she be so carefree? Su Qi wondered, her fingers tightening around the delicate stem of her champagne flute. After everything she's done. The conversation around her swirled, fragments of gossip and polite falsehoods reaching her ears. Su Qi felt a suffocating pressure, a sense of being trapped in a gilded cage. She wanted to scream, to tear down the elaborate floral arrangements, to shatter the illusion of harmony that permeated the room. But she wouldn't. She had endured too much, suffered too long, to break now. Shao Qi, a voice, heavy with feigned concern, broke through her thoughts. It was her adoptive mother. Su Qi turned, her face carefully composed into a mask of polite indifference. You should mingle with the guests. It's not good to stand alone. The words, though seemingly innocuous, carried an undercurrent of reprimand. As if I have a choice, Su Qi thought, her jaw clenching. They've made sure I'm an outcast in my own home. Before Su Qi could reply, a hush fell over the room. Grandpa Su, his face etched with years of wisdom and weariness, tapped his glass with a spoon. The clinking sound, amplified in the sudden silence, sent a shiver down Su Qi's spine. I have an announcement, he declared, his voice surprisingly strong despite his age. Su Qi's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of dread and anticipation swirling within her. As you all know, Grandpa Su continued, his gaze sweeping over the assembled guests, Shao Qi has been a part of our family for many years. He paused, his eyes settling on Su Qi. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch in her throat. She is a good child, he stated firmly, his voice cutting through the hushed whispers that had begun to circulate. Don't abandon an adopted daughter just because your biological one returned. A wave of shock rippled through the room. Su Qi stared at her grandfather, her eyes wide with disbelief. He's defending me. The thought was so unexpected, so utterly foreign, that it took a moment for her to process. She felt a lump forming in her throat, a strange mix of gratitude and grief threatening to overwhelm her. Murmurs erupted around the room, the carefully constructed facade of familial harmony beginning to crack. Mingzhu's face, previously radiant with smiles, had hardened into a mask of fury. Su Goen, Su Qi's adoptive father, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze darting between his father and his adopted daughter. His silence spoke volumes. Grandpa Su, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil he had unleashed, continued, there has been talk of marriage for Shao Qi. The Bai family's son, he trailed off, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his face. Su Qi felt a chill run down her spine. The Bai family's son, Bai Yi, he was known throughout the city for his intellectual disabilities. They want to marry me off to him. The thought was a blow to the gut, a cruel twist of the knife in her already wounded heart. Grandpa will decide and let him marry you, Grandpa Su declared, his voice ringing with finality. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Su Qi's mind raced, trying to grasp the full weight of his pronouncement. Is this a kindness or a punishment? She wondered, her heart pounding against her ribs. Han Zhichen, Mingzhu's fiancé, watched the scene unfold with a strange expression on his face. He had been engaged to Su Qi before Mingzhu's return, a fact that had been conveniently forgotten by the Su family. Now, seeing Su Qi being offered up as a sacrificial lamb to appease the Bai family, a flicker of something akin to guilt crossed his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it again, his gaze dropping to the floor. Coward, Su Qi thought, her contempt for him growing with each passing second. Su Jingshan, Mingzhu's brother, stood silently by his sister's side, his face an impassive mask. But beneath the surface, Su Qi sensed a flicker of unease, a hint of awareness that something wasn't right. He had always been the quiet observer, the one who saw more than he let on. Does he know the truth? Su Qi wondered, a sliver of hope piercing through her despair. The servants, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama, exchanged furtive glances, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. They had seen the subtle shifts in power, the undercurrents of resentment, the carefully constructed lies that held the Su family together. And now, they were watching it all begin to unravel. The banquet continued, but the atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. The forced gaiety had evaporated, replaced by a palpable tension that hung heavy in the air. Su Qi, standing amidst the wreckage of her family's carefully constructed facade, felt a strange sense of liberation. The truth, however painful, was finally beginning to surface. And she, the discarded daughter, the scapegoat, the silent sufferer, was finally ready to fight back. The remnants of the birthday banquet lay scattered across the grand dining hall, a stark contrast to the carefully constructed image of familial harmony that had been performed just hours earlier. The air, thick with the lingering scent of expensive wine and the phantom echo of forced laughter, now crackled with a different kind of energy, a tension so palpable, Su Qi could almost taste it. She stood by the window, the city lights blurring into a meaningless kaleidoscope against the backdrop of her swirling thoughts. Her reflection stared back, a ghost in a borrowed gown. Borrowed life, she thought bitterly. Borrowed happiness. Mr. Su cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the sudden quiet. Shao Qi, he began, his voice laced with a false warmth that grated on her nerves, we need to talk. His words hung heavy in the air, each syllable a carefully placed stone in the wall they were building around her. Su Qi didn't turn. She knew what was coming. Another performance. Another lie. About Bai Yi, Mrs. Su chimed in, her voice softer, yet equally deceptive. Su Qi could feel their gazes on her back, heavy with expectation, with the unspoken accusations that had become the soundtrack to her existence in this house. Imposter. Troublemaker. Ungrateful wretch. The litany echoed in her mind. The company, Mr. Su continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, is in dire straits. If we don't solidify our relationship with the Bai family, our century-old legacy, he trailed off, the unspoken threat hanging in the air. Su Qi finally turned, her gaze sweeping over the faces of her adoptive family. Her father, his face etched with a mixture of anxiety and what she recognized, with a chilling certainty, as relief. Her mother, wringing her hands, her eyes darting nervously between Su Qi and her husband. Even Mingzhu, perched on the arm of the sofa, her usual smugness replaced with a thinly veiled anticipation. They were all waiting. Waiting for her to break. To plead. To offer herself up as the sacrificial lamb. A bitter laugh threatened to escape her lips. Sacrificial lamb. Wasn't that what she had been all these years? A convenient scapegoat for Mingzhu's misdeeds. A silent recipient of their thinly veiled disdain. She had been a puppet, dancing to their tune, her every move dictated by their whims. And what, she finally spoke, her voice surprisingly steady, does solidifying our relationship with the Bai family entail? The question hung in the air, a single spark in the suffocating darkness. Mr. Su shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. It was Mrs. Su who answered, her voice trembling slightly. Marriage, Xiao Qi. A marriage between you and Bai Yi. The words hit Su Qi like a physical blow. She stumbled back, her hand instinctively reaching for the windowsill for support. Marriage? To Bai Yi, the man they all treated as a simpleton. The man she had pitied, protected, even befriended in this house of vipers. The absurdity of it all threatened to overwhelm her. He's not, she started, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say? That Bai Yi was not fit for marriage? That he deserved better than to be used as a pawn in their twisted game? That she deserved better? Mingzhu finally spoke, her voice dripping with false concern. Xiao Qi, dear, we know this is unexpected. But think of the family. Think of everything we've done for you. Her words were a poison dart, aimed straight at Su Qi's already fractured heart. Everything they've done for her. They had taken her in, yes, but they had also stripped her of her identity, her dignity, her very self. Su Qi closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her, suffocating her. She could almost hear Mingzhu's triumphant whisper in her ear, the unspoken I win. But something shifted within her. A flicker of defiance. A surge of anger that burned away the fear, the doubt, the years of suppressed resentment. When she opened her eyes again, her gaze was clear, unwavering. I will, she said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. I'll marry him. The relief on their faces was almost comical. Mr. Su let out a shaky breath, Mrs. Su began to weep, and Mingzhu's lips curled into a satisfied smile. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken her. But Su Qi knew better. This was not surrender. This was a gamble. A desperate throw of the dice in a game she had been forced to play. She had no illusions about what awaited her in this marriage. But she also knew that this was her only chance. Her only chance to break free from their suffocating grasp. Her only chance to uncover the truth about her past, about the lies they had woven around her. As she looked at their triumphant faces, a cold, hard resolve settled in her heart. They thought they were controlling her destiny. They were wrong. This was her move. This was her game now. Later, in the quiet solitude of her room, Su Qi sat by the window, the city lights no longer a blur, but pinpricks of hope against the vast darkness. Jiechen's face flashed before her eyes, his questioning gaze, the flicker of understanding she had glimpsed in his eyes during the banquet. He was the only one who seemed to see through the carefully constructed facade. The only one who seemed to sense the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. He knows, she thought, a flicker of warmth spreading through her chest. He must know. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. If Jichen knew, then there was a chance, however small, that she wasn't alone in this fight. A soft knock on the door startled her. It was Jingshen, Mingzhu's brother, his face etched with a mixture of concern and guilt. He had always been the quiet observer in this family drama, his silence both a shield and a burden. Xiao Qi, he began, his voice hesitant, are you all right? Su Qi looked at him, her gaze searching his face. She had always sensed a kindness in him, buried beneath layers of indifference. I will be, she replied, her voice firm. I will be. Jingshen nodded, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored her own. I know what Mingzhu did, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I know about the necklace. About the accusations. Su Qi's breath caught in her throat. He knew. It was confirmation, validation of everything she had suspected, everything she had endured. Tears welled up in her eyes, not tears of weakness, but tears of relief, of finally being seen, of finally being heard. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for telling me." Jingshan didn't reply, but his gaze held hers, a silent promise of support in the battles to come. As he turned to leave, a single thought echoed in Su Qi's mind: this is just the beginning. Sunlight, filtered through the elaborate latticework of the Bai family's garden pavilion, painted dappled patterns on the polished wooden floor. Su Qi sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the smooth jade of her bracelet cool against her skin. It was a stark contrast to the burning turmoil within her. The events of the past few days, the confrontation, the accusations, the raw hurt that had festered for years, now a gaping wound laid bare, left her feeling adrift. The Bai family home, once a sanctuary, now felt like another stage in her ongoing ordeal. She had agreed to this meeting, this introduction to Bai Yi, with a heavy heart. Another performance, another judgment. She closed her eyes briefly, the phantom sting of her adoptive mother's words echoing in her ears. Useless. Ungrateful. A stain on our family. A soft rustle nearby startled her. She opened her eyes, her gaze meeting the figure of Bai Yi. He stood a few feet away, his posture slightly hunched, his gaze downcast. He was dressed simply, his clothes loose-fitting, his hair a bit unruly. He fit the image of a gentle, unassuming, perhaps even simple, young man. Exactly as she'd been led to believe. A flicker of something akin to pity arose within her. Another pawn in this intricate game of families and reputations. Was he, too, a victim of circumstance? He shifted, a small, nervous gesture, and then spoke, his voice quiet, almost a murmur. "Hello, Su Qi." The formal address, his use of her full name, pricked at her already raw nerves. It felt distant. Was this how he interacted with everyone? Or was it a deliberate choice, a way to maintain a safe distance? She forced a smile, a pale imitation of genuine warmth. "Hello, Bai Yi." Her voice sounded strained even to her own ears. A long silence hung between them, punctuated only by the gentle chirping of unseen birds. Su Qi fought the urge to fidget. This forced politeness, this awkward dance of social niceties, grated on her. She longed to escape, to return to the solitude of her room, to bury herself under the covers and let the world fade away. Bai Yi cleared his throat, drawing her attention back to him. He was looking at her now, his gaze direct, surprisingly intense. "I understand you've been through a lot recently." The words were simple, yet they held a weight, a depth of understanding that surprised her. He wasn't looking at her with pity, she realized, but with a quiet empathy. A flicker of curiosity ignited within her, chasing away some of the lingering gloom. "You could say that," she replied, her voice laced with a touch of self-deprecating humor. It was a defense mechanism, a shield against the vulnerability that threatened to engulf her. He nodded slowly, as if absorbing her words. "They say you're not who they thought you were." A knot tightened in her stomach. Not who they thought she was. The words echoed the accusations that had been hurled at her, the whispers that had followed her like shadows. She met his gaze, her own eyes hardening. "And what do you think?" A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features. The gentle, unassuming facade crumbled, replaced by something sharp, intelligent, almost calculating. It was like watching a different person emerge from beneath a carefully constructed disguise. "I think," he said, his voice now clear and steady, devoid of the earlier hesitation, that the world often mistakes quiet observation for lack of understanding. He paused, his gaze piercing. "Aren't you intellectually disabled?" The question, blunt and unexpected, hung in the air. Su Qi stared at him, her mind reeling. How could he know? This was a detail only her closest family knew, a secret carefully guarded. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of fear and confusion swirling within her. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "My son did that," a voice called out, interrupting their tense exchange. Elder Bai, his face etched with a mixture of amusement and pride, stepped into the pavilion. He did that to dispel the outside world's suspicions. To make them underestimate him. Su Qi turned her gaze to Elder Bai, her mind struggling to process this new information. Bai Yi an act? A deliberate performance? But why? The questions tumbled through her mind, each one more baffling than the last. Elder Bai continued, his eyes twinkling. He's always been sharp, my boy. Sees things others miss. Hears things others ignore. He looked at Su Qi, his gaze shrewd. He knew about you, Su Qi. Knew the truth long before it came to light. A wave of dizziness washed over Su Qi. The world seemed to tilt, the carefully constructed reality she had known shattering into a million pieces. Bai Yi, the quiet, unassuming young man, was a facade. He had known. All along. But why hadn't he said anything? Why maintain the charade? And what did he really think of her, now that the masks were off? The uncertainty gnawed at her, a chilling premonition of the storm that was yet to come. She looked at Bai Yi, her eyes searching his, desperate for answers, for some semblance of understanding in this increasingly complex and bewildering world. He met her gaze, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, Su Qi felt a strange kinship, a shared sense of isolation in this intricate dance of secrets and lies. The game, she realized, had just begun. The air in the Su family home crackled with a tension so thick, it felt like a physical force. Su Qi stood amidst the opulent furnishings, a stark contrast to the gilded cages surrounding her. For years, she had been a shadow, a ghost in her own life, her every move scrutinized, her every word twisted. Now, the shadows were receding, the truth threatening to blaze forth like a wildfire. She looked at Mingzhu, her adoptive sister, the perfect daughter, the golden child. Mingzhu's carefully constructed composure was beginning to fracture, tiny cracks appearing on the porcelain mask she presented to the world. Su Qi's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. This is it, she thought, the moment of reckoning. I was never the Su family's heiress, Su Qi stated, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor that ran through her. The words hung in the air, each syllable a hammer blow against the foundation of the Su family's carefully crafted reality. Su Goen, her adoptive father, looked at her with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, his usual authoritative demeanor faltering. He glanced at his wife, then back at Su Qi, the question unspoken but clear in his eyes. How could this be? How could everything we believed be a lie? Su's mother, her face pale, clutched her husband's arm. A ripple of unease spread through the room, disturbing the carefully arranged tableau of family harmony. The servants, silent witnesses to years of subtle cruelty and veiled accusations, shifted nervously, their gazes darting between Su Qi and Mingzhu. You're the real Su family heiress, Su Qi continued, her gaze unwavering as she locked eyes with Mingzhu. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of years of deception, of betrayal, of a life stolen. Mingzhu's carefully crafted facade finally crumbled. Her eyes, usually so bright and confident, now flickered with panic. A muscle twitched in her jaw, the only outward sign of the turmoil raging within her. No, she thought desperately, this can't be happening. I won't let her take everything from me. Su Jingshan, Mingzhu's brother, watched the scene unfold with a strange detachment. He had always been aware, on some level, of his sister's manipulations, the subtle digs, the carefully planted lies. He had chosen to ignore them, to maintain the illusion of family unity. Now, confronted with the raw truth, he felt a pang of guilt, a cold knot forming in his stomach. I should have said something, he thought, I should have stopped her. Han Zhichen, Mingzhu's fiancé, formerly engaged to Su Qi, remained silent, his expression unreadable. He had known the truth for a long time, a silent observer of the unfolding drama. He had chosen to stay silent, bound by a complex web of family obligations and social expectations. Now, he watched Su Qi, a mixture of admiration and regret swirling within him. She's stronger than I ever gave her credit for, he thought. Grandpa Su, the family patriarch, sat in his armchair, his eyes sharp and piercing. He had seen more than anyone, his wisdom born of age and experience. He had allowed the deception to continue, for reasons known only to him. But now, a flicker of something akin to satisfaction crossed his face. The truth always comes to light, he thought. Bai Yi, initially dismissed by the Su family as intellectually disabled, sat quietly observing. His eyes, usually veiled with a gentle innocence, held a surprising depth of understanding. He saw the pain etched on Su Qi's face, the fear in Mingzhu's eyes, the guilt that gnawed at the others. He reached out and took Su Qi's hand, his touch a silent reassurance. I'm here, his grip seemed to say, I believe you. The room descended into a cacophony of accusations, denials, and explanations. The carefully constructed narrative of Su Qi's clumsiness, her supposed ungratefulness, began to unravel. The truth, suppressed for so long, spilled forth, messy and raw. The scars on my back, Su Qi said, her voice trembling slightly, they weren't from a fall. Mingzhu pushed me down the stairs. The room fell silent. The servants gasped, their eyes wide with shock. Su Goen's face drained of color, his gaze shifting to Mingzhu, who stood frozen, her face a mask of denial. It was an accident. Mingzhu cried, her voice shrill, the perfect daughter facade shattering completely. I didn't mean to, you lied about my grades, sabotaged my relationships, poisoned my family against me, Su Qi continued, each word a precise strike against Mingzhu's carefully constructed lies. You even tried to frame me for theft. Su's mother let out a sob, her hands flying to her mouth. The realization of her complicity, her blindness to her own daughter's cruelty, hit her with the force of a physical blow. She looked at Mingzhu, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. How could you? Her gaze seemed to scream. One by one, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The stolen jewelry, the forged letters, the whispered rumors all orchestrated by Mingzhu, fueled by her jealousy and insecurity. The Su family, so proud of their perfect daughter, were forced to confront the ugly truth. Their carefully curated world, built on a foundation of lies, was crumbling around them. Su Qi looked at Bai Yi, his hand still holding hers, a steady anchor in the storm. In his unwavering support, she found the strength to continue. He saw the real her, the strength beneath the vulnerability, the resilience forged in the crucible of years of hardship. And in his eyes, she saw not pity, but respect. A flicker of something warm and hopeful ignited within her, a fragile flame in the darkness. Maybe, she thought, maybe I can finally be free. The rain was relentless, a torrential downpour that mirrored the tempest raging inside Su Qi. Each drop felt like a tiny shard of ice, piercing her skin, a chilling reminder of the years of cold indifference she had endured. She gripped the railing of the balcony, the metal slick and unforgiving beneath her fingers, much like the family she'd once believed in. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, the sound swallowed by the roar of the wind. They thought they could break me, she thought, her eyes narrowing, but I am not glass. I am steel, forged in the fires of their betrayal. Her gaze swept across the sprawling Su estate, now shrouded in a hazy curtain of rain. It had been her prison, her gilded cage, but tonight, the bars were coming down. A flicker of movement at the edge of her vision caught her attention. Mingzhu. Her adoptive sister, her tormentor, her shadow. Mingzhu stood poised in the doorway, her face a mask of chilling calm, a stark contrast to the tumultuous storm swirling around them. The silence between them was thick with unspoken accusations, years of resentment bubbling just beneath the surface. Su Qi's breath hitched, a knot of dread tightening in her chest. What game are you playing now, Mingzhu? Why, Qi? Mingzhu's voice was a silken whisper, laced with false concern. What are you doing out in this weather? You'll catch a cold. Each word was a calculated jab, a reminder of Su Qi's perceived fragility, the label of clumsy and unrefined that Mingzhu had so carefully cultivated. Su Qi's jaw tightened. Don't pretend to care, Mingzhu. Not after everything you've done. Her voice, though quiet, held a steely resolve that startled even herself. She saw a flicker of surprise in Mingzhu's eyes, a momentary crack in her carefully constructed facade. What are you talking about? Mingzhu's voice was sharp now, the veneer of innocence beginning to crumble. You're being dramatic, as usual. Dramatic? Su Qi's laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Is that what you call years of systematic abuse? Is that what you call framing me, stealing my fiancé, poisoning my reputation? The words tumbled out, fueled by the pent-up rage that had been simmering within her for so long. Mingzhu's eyes widened, a flash of panic crossing her features. She took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the heavy vase perched precariously on the railing. Su Qi saw the movement, the glint of malice in her eyes, and understood. She's going to try to kill me. The realization was chilling, yet strangely liberating. She had nothing left to lose. You twisted demon. Mingzhu hissed, her voice raw with fury. Why are you so fortunate? Why do you get to have everything? Her grip tightened on the vase, her knuckles white. Su Qi met her gaze, unflinching. I never had anything, Mingzhu. You took it all. My family, my fiancé, my life. You stole it all. With a primal scream, Mingzhu lunged, bringing the heavy vase down toward Su Qi's head. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Su Qi saw the distorted rage in Mingzhu's eyes, the swing of the vase, the relentless rain blurring their figures into grotesque silhouettes. She braced herself for the impact, a strange calm settling over her. This is it, she thought. This is the end. But the blow never landed. A strong arm suddenly intercepted Mingzhu's attack, deflecting the vase. It shattered against the stone floor, the sound echoing through the storm. Han Zhichen, Mingzhu's fiancé, stood between them, his face grim. Enough, Mingzhu, he said, his voice cold and hard. It's over. The sudden intervention, the unexpected betrayal, sent Mingzhu reeling. Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape, a way out of the tightening web of truth. The commotion had drawn the rest of the Su family to the balcony. Su Goen, his face etched with confusion and disbelief, stared at the scene unfolding before him. His wife stood beside him, her hand trembling as she clutched his arm. Su Jingshan, Mingzhu's brother, watched from the sidelines, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Even Grandpa Su, usually stoic and unyielding, looked shaken to his core. What is the meaning of this? Su Guan stammered, his voice barely audible above the storm. Su Qi took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation she had been dreading for years. It's time for the truth to come out, she said, her voice ringing with newfound strength. She began to speak, her words precise and unwavering, recounting the years of manipulation and abuse, the subtle slights and the blatant lies. She revealed Mingzhu's schemes, her jealousy, her desperate attempts to erase Su Qi from the family. She exposed the complicity of her adoptive parents, their blind faith in their biological daughter, their willful ignorance of the suffering they inflicted upon their adopted child. As Su Qi spoke, the storm outside intensified. The wind howled, the rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the turmoil erupting within the Su family. The carefully constructed facade they had maintained for so long began to crumble, revealing the rot and decay beneath. A sudden, sharp crack of thunder pierced the air, followed by a low rumble. The ground beneath their feet trembled. A mudslide. The hillside behind the estate, weakened by the relentless rain, began to give way. Panic erupted. The servants screamed, running for cover. The Su family huddled together, their faces pale with fear. Mingzhu, her eyes wide with terror, reached out for her mother, but was met with a cold, unwavering stare. The realization that her reign of deception was over, that her family was finally seeing her true nature, was more terrifying than the impending mudslide. The ground gave way, the earth swallowing the carefully manicured lawns, the ornate fountains, the symbols of the Su family's wealth and status. The house groaned, the walls cracking under the pressure. In the chaos, Su Qi saw Bai Yi, his eyes fixed on her, a beacon of calm amidst the storm. He reached out, his hand steady and strong, pulling her away from the crumbling edge of the balcony. "Come with me," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the roar of the mudslide. "I'll keep you safe." As the Su family's world collapsed around them, Su Qi knew that she was finally free. The storm had washed away the lies, the deceit, the years of pain. And in the ruins, she found her true family, the ones who saw her, who valued her, who loved her for who she truly was. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the lingering petrichor from the storm that had recently ravaged the city. Outside, the sky was a bruised canvas of fading purples and grays, mirroring the emotional turmoil within the hospital room. Su Qi sat by the window, the faint light etching her profile, her gaze fixed on the swaying branches of a lone, resilient tree. The events of the past few hours played on a continuous loop in her mind: Mingzhu's frantic confession, the shocked faces of her adoptive parents, the quiet sobs of her mother. It was a chaotic symphony of emotions she couldn't quite process, each note a jarring reminder of the years she'd spent shrouded in a web of lies and deceit. Was it truly over? She wondered, a tremor of uncertainty running through her. Could she ever truly escape the shadow of the past? The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was a constant reminder of the fragility of life, a fragile thread that Mingzhu had nearly severed with her reckless actions. Su Qi's fingers unconsciously traced the faint lines etched on the back of her hand, a nervous habit she developed over the years. Each line, each imperfection, felt like a testament to the battles she'd fought, the silent screams she'd swallowed. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, trying to find a semblance of peace amidst the storm raging within her. Forgiveness, she thought, the word foreign and heavy on her tongue. Could she truly forgive the people who had stolen her life, her identity, her very sense of self? The door creaked open, and her adoptive parents entered, their faces etched with a mixture of guilt and apprehension. They approached her hesitantly, as if afraid she might shatter at their touch. Her mother reached out a trembling hand, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Shao Qi," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Su Qi flinched, her body instinctively recoiling from the touch. The years of coldness, of indifference, had created an invisible barrier between them, a barrier that seemed insurmountable. Her father, Su Goen, cleared his throat, his voice strained. We need to talk," he said, his gaze avoiding hers. Su Qi remained silent, her eyes fixed on the cityscape outside. Each skyscraper, each flickering light, seemed to mock her, reminding her of the vastness of her loneliness, the depth of her betrayal. "The doctors, they found something," her mother continued, her voice barely a whisper. Su Qi turned to face them, her heart pounding in her chest. A strange premonition washed over her, a sense of impending revelation. She held her breath, waiting for the words that would either mend the fractured pieces of her life or shatter them beyond repair. Her mother took a deep breath, her eyes welling up with tears. "Shao Qi," she repeated, her voice choked with emotion, she's your daughter." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Su Qi stared at her mind struggling to comprehend the enormity of the revelation. Mingzhu's daughter, her daughter. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she gripped the edge of the bed for support. The world around her seemed to tilt, the familiar hospital room morphing into a surreal landscape of fragmented memories and half-truths. Su Goen stepped forward, his face etched with remorse. "It was all our fault," he admitted, his voice barely audible. We knew the truth all along. Mingzhu, she manipulated us. She threatened to expose everything. We were afraid, so we went along with it." The confession hung in the air, thick with regret and shame. Su Qi's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragmented puzzle of her life. Mingzhu's jealousy, her desperation to be the favored child, her willingness to go to any lengths to maintain her position, it all began to make a terrifying, heartbreaking sense. The years of neglect, the constant accusations, the subtle manipulations, it was all a carefully orchestrated performance, a cruel charade designed to keep her in the shadows, to erase her very existence. "We want to be a family again," her mother pleaded, her voice trembling. "We know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, Shao Qi. Give us a chance to make things right." Su Qi looked at them, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. The anger, the hurt, the years of suppressed pain, it was a heavy burden to bear. But beneath the layers of resentment, a flicker of hope began to ignite. The hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she could finally find the acceptance and love she had craved for so long. Su Jingshan entered the room, his face pale and drawn. He walked over to Su Qi, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "I knew," he admitted quietly. "I knew what Mingzhu was doing, but I was too cowardly to speak up. I'm so sorry, Shao Qi." His apology, though belated, offered a sliver of solace. It was a validation of her pain, a confirmation that she wasn't imagining things, that her suffering was real. Han Jiachen appeared at the doorway, his expression unreadable. He met Su Qi's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. He had known the truth, too. His presence, his unwavering support, offered a sense of stability in the midst of the chaos. Even Grandpa Su, his usually stern face softened with remorse, acknowledged the injustice. He reached for Su Qi's hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "My child," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I failed you. But I promise, from now on, you will have your rightful place in this family." The room fell silent, the only sound the gentle hum of the machines. Su Qi closed her eyes, taking a deep breath.